not seeing any questions here. Kathy, anybody online?
Nothing online.
Thank you. Shumon, you online?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, and I can see you too.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steve. I'm Shumon, and my collaborator on this short presentation today is Eric Osterweil, who should be online somewhere, and I can see him, so great. So Eric, you should feel free to jump in and interject whenever you like. But let's get started. The title of this talk is Don't Go Insecure. And next slide. Let me provide a bit of background on that statement. About 3 years ago, our good friend and colleague Wes Hardiker did a presentation at this same workshop, I believe, where he proposed that you might want to temporarily unsign your zone in the course of algorithm rollovers. And subsequently, he and others have advocated the same strategy for things like provider transition, so changing DNS operators. And the reasons cited are the same. So on simplicity of operation, in cases where you prefer stability over security, and where you don't have good software automation to help you. And in this presentation, Eric and I will argue why you should not do this, that is, don't go unsigned. No need to worry, Wes, Eric, and I are still good friends, even if we have some disagreements from time to time. And we hope to have an interesting discussion in the Q&A. So next slide, please. The first point we want to make is that stability and security are not really mutually exclusive properties, and that we can have both. And in fact, more importantly, we need both. Any change, in fact, if not done correctly, can cause stability problems. And this includes going unsigned. And we can even cite very stark real-world examples of this. So in late 2021, Slack attempted to back out their DNSSEC deployment by unsigning, and their procedure for doing so was not correct. And that caused a much bigger problem and a longer duration outage as a result. So what I think we need is operationally robust and correct procedures for maintaining DNSSEC, not necessarily sacrificing security or some other property for stability. So next slide, please. And part of that indeed is having, as Wes pointed out, good software automation. And in fact, a lot of that exists today already and is getting better, as you've heard from other talks. So if you feel you don't have that, or that there are gaps in automation or even protocol deficiencies, we would urge you to speak up and let the DNS operator and protocol engineering community know so that we can identify places where more work is needed. And now let me quickly, so I see Wes has his hand raised. I only have 4 slides, so we're going to quickly run through these, and then we can have a Q&A after that. So I'm going to quickly run through our reasons for not going unsigned during operator migrations or algorithm changes or whatever other process that might motivate you to do that. So next slide, please. And we'll start with the most obvious one, which is removal of security. Why would you want to do that? Even if it's only temporary, you've opened up a window of vulnerability. So a time window where adversaries can spoof your DNS responses. And most organizations that really care about their security, I believe, won't really consider doing this. Next slide. So sometimes people will say, well, it doesn't really matter. Everything will be fine. Applications are ultimately protected at a higher layer with TLS anyway. And our response is that's not really true either. We need what's sometimes called defense in depth. That is cryptographic protections at every layer. So network, DNS, transport, application. And if you don't have that, firstly, you won't be able to detect attacks early enough. And you might be victimized by a denial of service attack at the lower level that you could have detected and worked around. And instead, that may result in you not even being able to reach your application, which is an outage and a security problem. And even if you can, TLS doesn't always protect you. Many examples can be cited. I've included one here. You can follow the link for more details, but this quick summary is there was a DNS spoofing attack on a cryptocurrency wallet company, and TLS did not protect the victims, and as a result of which they suffered substantial financial losses. And the final point is, and of course, in the absence of DNSSEC, DNS spoofing can allow attackers to more easily fraudulently obtain domain-validated certificates, which can then be used to subvert TLS security. Next slide, please. So reason number 2 is that DANE applications will break. And just in case you don't know, I think most people probably in the audience is familiar, but DANE is a protocol that essentially uses DNSSEC to authenticate public keys and certificates used in application security. So DANE for SMTP security in particular seems to have quite a substantial deployment already, and you probably don't want to suffer the consequences of silent removal of security, or worse, loss or dropping of email. So Eric knows a lot more about the DANE SMTP. I'm going to let him elaborate later in the talk, but the other thing I wanted to mention is DANE, in the minds of many, hopes to eventually be a competitor, or at least a viable alternative to the ubiquitous web or internet PKI, which has a host of many security problems, which I'm sure many people know. And if it ever hopes to achieve that, it simply cannot tolerate having any insecure modes, temporary or not. Next slide, please. So vendor lock-in scenarios is the other one. If you're a security conscious organization, you probably won't consider going unsigned just to make it easier to change DNS operators. So if an operator does not provide the mechanisms to non-disruptively sign zones in and out, such as by not supporting the multi-signer transition mechanisms, they're likely to create a vendor lock-in situation for those customers, which is not a healthy state of affairs for the ecosystem. And furthermore, that might in turn discourage customers from using those providers in the first place. Next slide, please. And I'll end with another reason that to us at least seems kind of obvious. Right? DNSSEC is a security protocol. And if going unsigned is seen as a normal mode of operation with DNSSEC, we think it simply won't be taken seriously in the larger security community, and that is not good. And I think that's the last slide. Next slide, please. Let me just check. Right. Okay. So I'll stop here. Eric, would you like to jump in and elaborate on any of the points, maybe the DANE topic, or bring up any new ones?
Yeah, I'll just jump in real quick. I think we're probably eager to fold Wes since his hand is up, so I won't go too long. But I'll sort of say I think Wes is absolutely a DANE expert as well. So I look forward to his input here. But I think to your point, Shumon, we have a whole bunch of mechanisms that are there, including RFC 8901, that tell you how you can actually conduct the known operational steps that people need to do without going insecure. And so if the answer is like that maybe doesn't look great to me, I'd rather go insecure. That's what I think we're pushing back against, is not that there is something we can't do right now and just gut it out. It's that I think we have a lot of protocol machinery, and DANE SMTP is really picking up. I mean, the citation I have from 2 years ago is that 41.5% in a study published at Usenix Security 22, Usenix ATC 2022, says 41.5% of email providers are validating DNSSEC today, and 31.7% of the providers are using TLSA. And if a zone were to go insecure for a moment, that would mean the start TLS transaction that was dependent on DANE would fail. So that means in the middle of the night, if this happens, email is then potentially vulnerable to interception, and nobody really knows until you go secure it. So I think it's those sort of things you're building in. Dependent systems don't know when something has gone insecure. They just become insecure. So you're giving people an attack surface without telling them where it is. And I think it has the potential to destabilize a lot of forward momentum that we have right now. So that's just my addition to what Shumon's saying, and I'll pull myself up short.
Yeah, great. So I don't know, Steve, if we can do a little Q&A now, or you were trying to hold them to the end, but I'd like to, I see Wes's hands raised, so would love to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, I think we've been patient enough, Wes.
Thank you very much. Well, when you call me out on a slide, I have to respond, right?
Right.
So let me start by saying I agree 100% with everything you guys just said, right? 100%. You should absolutely never go insecure once you have a secured zone. You should absolutely use automated software. You should absolutely have the tools that you need to do that. The draft in question that I wrote was intended to be a little provocational, to fix some of the issues that you guys actually addressed in the first place. It was written after 2 different cases came to my plate with people asking for advice. They said, look, I have this situation. Well, I actually have 2 situations. One was exactly what you described. It was a vendor lock-in. They had no ability to transfer the keys into their new provider that was going to be better with better software and provided them better automation and better operational stability. They didn't have, there was no software written to actually fix their problem. The second one was somebody that tried to do the right thing with their domain and had used software that they didn't fully understand, and they wanted to do an algorithm change according even to my recommendations. And it was clear that that the risk of going operationally unstable because of their lack of knowledge and the software that they were using didn't have a fully automated algorithm rollover process could have brought their domain down for, a day or, depending on TTLs and signature lives and stuff. And so I told them, look, you're not depending on DNSSEC, endlessly. You have to make the call. You have to make the call. Is that operational potential outage worse than going signed or unsigned? I just gave them the facts. So that's actually the reason that I wrote the draft. I will push back on one comment, though, which is that the Dane SMTP support is designed with the notion that I think Victor, who's my co-author on the draft on the RFCs, put best, right? The mail must go through. So the Dane SMTP support is designed with that in notion, and you lose protection, you lose the encryption ability. You'll actually still get opportunistic encryption, but you won't get authenticated encryption while you're in the unsigned point. So you're 1000% right that you have a period of time where you're going to accept mail, assuming you leave your mail server up, that will be unprotected or there could be a man a machine in the middle that actually could break the encryption because there's a machine in the middle. It won't be it'll keep you protected from passive eavesdropping, but not active eavesdropping is what it comes down to. So in the end, let me sum up by saying I agree with you 1000%. Right? In my document, it actually said you shouldn't do this, but there are a couple of cases where if you really are stuck in where you are and you've got to get to the other place, you may not have a choice.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, Wes. And yeah, as you say, you wrote a slightly provocative document, and you did indeed provoke it, so that's good. On your comment about Dane for SMTP being opportunistic, yeah, that is a very good point. But I think people, when they're transitioning DNSSEC, turning on and off, I think in the field they have made mistakes and people have lost their mail, as far as I recall, every now and then. So there is a danger involved. And I think the fact that the largest application that uses Dane today is opportunistic kind of hurts us a little bit, right? Because if you think about it, you want more secure modes of operation. For example, if e-commerce or any part of e-commerce depended on Dane, I think we just simply wouldn't be having this conversation because you couldn't go insecure, right?
Right.
So one quick point. SMTP and Dane is not opportunistic when you have DNSSEC signed zones. It's only when it's unsigned that it becomes opportunistic. So thank you. Oh, by the way, there's 4 million Dane protected email zones right now. I just looked up Victor's current numbers, so that's actually quite good.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I'll just sort of throw in there a couple things. Just my vague recollection of the configuration for, setting up your SMTP servers that you can, like everything, you can sort of, hang yourself with your own shoelaces. And so there is I believe, if I remember correctly, there's a way someone can say, I really want to be super secure, and you can configure a pedantic mode that'll cause it to fall back. If I can't verify the Dane TLSA record and I know it's there, I'm gonna break. And so I think we may all agree that you probably shouldn't configure it that way. And maybe that's not even a valid configuration anymore. But it was one of the things that just sort of pointed out, we give people a lot of tools. And the more we can sort of like, error-proof them, kiss them, the better. And I think there is this, potential vulnerability, certainly if we want to then use Dane for something more. So, as Dane is showing real signs of life, as you just said with the statistic, we envision that there's lots of things people could do, and it comes down to when somebody wants to validate, is DNSSEC on? It's not you, the zone operator, planning a deployment necessarily. It's related to that, but it's sort of like when somebody needs to check the credential. If you happen to be insecure at that time, then the dependent system, the protocol, whatever the application is, will make whatever decision it will make. And one of the things it could do is just break. Or it really undermines that where you could have been secure, you ought to have been. But I don't want to reopen. I like the sort of your high level, Wes. It sounds like we're all in violent agreement, which is fantastic. So I think that's a great message to get out there.
Thank you. We're ready to move on? Question mark? Shumon?
Yep. I think so.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
Actually,
John.
can I make a comment on Shuman's thing before I start?
You can do anything you want.
Oh, good. Wow, what a pal. I'm actually going to push back a little bit on Wes's pushback, because on the one hand, I'm probably one of the few people who managed to screw up his mail using Dane because I put the wrong hash in the TLSA. And the only reason I noticed was that my wife said I can't get mail from my mother because her mother uses Comcast, which is one of the few large providers that actually pays attention to Dane. If I'd gone insecure, there's actually because mail is so complicated, there's sort of a belt and suspenders thing here. There's a thing called MTA-STS, which exists largely because somebody at Google hates Dane, which is basically it's a way to certify your mail server using a CA, and so like even if for this single application, if Dane goes away, you still have this other thing that can secure your mail server. But I agree in general, like if Dane works and your certs are there, the whole thing is much easier. Thus endeth the comment. Now I'm happy to talk about 2 trendy ways to hang your DNS cache. And I guess